Two suspected Chinese spy cases have made headlines around the world for their infiltration into high-ranking government positions and for the brazenness of their illegal activity. In the US, the aide to two New York governors, 41-year-old Linda Sun, was arrested on charges of being an illegal Chinese agent. And in the Philippines, suspected Chinese spy, 33-year-old former Mayor Alice Guo, who was on the run for weeks, was deported back to Manila after her arrest in Indonesia. Are these isolated cases of Beijing's influence operations, or are they just the tip of the iceberg in a strategy to push China's agenda across democracies? How much of Beijing's grand strategy is about Taiwan? And is China spying any different to that of the US, which it says is increasing operations within China? Joining us today are Raymond Song, Prospect Foundation Vice President and International Relations Expert, and Gemont Lalari, Institute of National Defense and Security Research visiting scholar. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
According to the indictment by US prosecutors, Linda Sun, a Chinese-born US naturalized citizen, held key positions in New York state government for over a decade until 2023, using her role to covertly advance the Chinese Communist Party's objectives. This included undermining US-Taiwan relations. She received millions of dollars and kickbacks in return, including expensive shipments of the rare Nanjing salted duck egg. In 2016, Sun blocked interactions between Taiwanese government officials and the governor's office, coinciding with President Tsai Ing-wen's inauguration. She also secretly shared internal documents, forged mayoral documents, helped the CCP access an official call about COVID-19, and censored the governor office's mentions of Xinjiang and Tibet. Sun pleaded not guilty to failing to register as a foreign agent, to visa fraud and to money laundering. Her husband denies lesser charges. Raymond, let me come to you first. How did she get away with it for so long?
I think that gradually she acted on Chinese behalf in the American states and also in the New York, using his role as the deputy chief of staff to the New York governors. And it's well known that the Chinese government and the Communist Party is using the personal relations and networks to influence key persons within the United States government. And this case is special because it's influenced the U.S. state officials. And so the sign of infiltration into the U.S. governmental system was the special new development here.
Right. Gemont, what's your view on what was unique or special about this case?
Well, I think it's, in some respects, it's standard operating procedure for the Chinese Communist Party to try to recruit people who are ethnically Chinese in different countries to do their behalf, to do their bidding. It's a classic placement and access scenario where the Chinese Communist Party uses the Ministry of State Security and the United Front Works Department and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all the government agencies, the PLA as well, to set the motion into collecting intelligence and then deciding to take action on that intelligence to modify it for their benefit. And I would say that the main difference that China has in terms of its intelligence operations is focused on intellectual property theft. That's not what most countries do when they collect intelligence. They focus on...
But for this case in particular, though, Gemont.
Oh, in this case. So this case specifically, it has to do...
What did you think that was perhaps unique or special in this case, or was it representative?
Well, the first part, I guess, is the fact that she was in office for two state governors. That was unique, and that the U.S. government didn't detect that she was spying for the Communist Party. And then, of course, the fact is that a lot of the reporting does not emphasize the fact that actually the Democratic Party has had some problems with spies, not only in New York, but also in California. We had Senator Feinstein's driver was found out to be a spy, and also Eric Stilwell, who's a member of Congress, had a woman who her name was Fang Fang, I think.
Raymond, do you have
the prosecutors for the U.S. New York State is directing to specific actions. Linda influence the governor to take, including to avoid the criticism of China on the human rights record in Xinjiang. Also influence, for example, setting up liaisons between, even in COVID period, liaisons between Chinese officials to New York State officials, and also change the plans for the visit of Taiwan officials with the New York officials. So those are the specific actions that Linda
So do you believe that was, this is what makes this case unique, Raymond, is that
the other
right?
side of the evidence that she took money from the Chinese government. And she used those monies, laundered money to buy luxury cars and delicacies from China was used to lure her. So according to the foreign agent regulations under the US law, that if you took money from the foreign government and used that to work within the political system of the United States, to work for foreign government, you have to declare your interest.
Right. And so, Gaimon, if you can explain to us, I mean, obviously every country has spies.
Right.
The US also has spies.
Right.
How is this case different to a US spy case?
Well, the U.S. and other countries around the world don't use their spies to collect economic intelligence to promote the private companies in their own country to build their own the competitiveness that China does. So basically, what happens is China aggressively will steal intellectual property from companies and then give that information to Chinese companies so that they compete better against American companies, and eventually American companies lose business, go out of business, and the Chinese companies become the dominant force.
Right.
In fact,
but this wasn't the case with Linda Sun, right?
Sorry?
Was this the case with Linda Sun?
Well, in the case of Linda Sun, she was an agent of influence, which is a bit different than economic espionage. You asked me about what does China do that's unique or the same as other intelligence organizations. So Linda Sun was an agent of influence, and what her job is to make sure that the Communist Party's priorities are covered, and anything that the governor's office was pursuing that was counter to the Chinese Communist Party's desire was stopped. This similar type of activity has occurred several times in many countries, including Canada, and there's many cases that's a problem.
In the Philippines, former Mayor Alice Guo is to face justice after weeks on the run across Southeast Asia. Guo faces charges jointly with her associates of fraud and money laundering to the tune of $1.8 million or 100 million pesos. Her so-called sister Sheila and business partner Cassandra Leong were among those charged. Suspicion that Guo is a sleeper agent working as an asset for Beijing have grown. She was found to have the same fingerprints as a Chinese national by the name of Guo Huaping from 2005 immigration records. She also has property ties to Chinese business partners, serving jail time in Singapore, convicted of money laundering using forgery. Raymond, let me come to you. Do you believe Guo is a Chinese spy, or is she simply a criminal?
There's an investigation needs to do, because the mystery surrounding her identity is the cause of allegation of that she is working for China, because she may not be the Filipino nationalities as she claimed, because she still need to really point it out her real identity to explain why the fingerprint matched Chinese nationals.
Yeah. Gaimon, what's your view? Do you think she's a Chinese spy?
The courts in the Philippines will determine whether they will punish her if the evidence is sufficient. But it's my opinion that she is ethnically Chinese in the Philippines. The Chinese government, as I mentioned before, tries to control the ethnic Chinese all around the world. And so they have spies in those communities. And people don't get to powerful positions without the express permission of the Chinese government. And so therefore, I would argue that there's a high likelihood that she is directly connected to the Communist Party of China, and she would not have gotten into a public, powerful position without their support.
Right. And do you believe that there are many cases like Guo and like Sun around the world?
Yes. Just in the United States, for example, in the last 10 years, there's been over 200 cases of espionage by a variety of people, not only ethnic Chinese, but also Americans who don't come from China.
Right.
But the majority of them are ethnically Chinese.
But these would be the highest profile to date, I mean.
Right, and don't forget, these are the ones that were caught. We don't know which ones are still operating in all countries around the world. So I believe that the Chinese Communist Party of China had two significant emotional events in their beginning, 1926, 27, and 1936. They were almost destroyed. But the reason why they survived was because of their intelligence network that compromised the KMT, the Nationalist Party in China. So they learned quickly that if they don't have intelligence assets within the community of their enemies, they could be destroyed.
Right. Raymond, after Linda Sun's arrest, there were calls for the expulsion of China's Consul General in New York, that is Huang Ping.
Yes.
Now, the governor's office said, this is New York governor's office, said that Huang had been removed, but then the State Department contradicted that and said that he had actually left because his term was up and it wasn't to do with an expulsion. And yet, on September 5th, the Chinese Communist Party reported that Huang Ping attended the 2024 Blue Cloud Gala hosted by the Chinese Institute in America. And at that place, he emphasized the importance of advancing China-US relations. So what can we make of all of this?
It is customary that if a certain person with the diplomatic or consular status in the host state was found to be involving espionage, that will be considered as a persona non grata and be expelled. And that happened customarily. For example, between the United Kingdom and Russia, they mutually expelled their diplomats, consular, and also for the United States, what happened in 2020, the closure of Houston's consular in Texas, alleging the Trump administration alleging that's a hub of spies and dens of spies and covering all kinds of espionage activities. And those are clear evidence cases that expulsion will be involved, or even closure of the whole embassy or a consular office will be involved.
Yes.
But for this case, of course, this one is for more delicate or softer version for the United States to say government to say that that consular in New York, it was considered already removed from her position. It's a softer version of that, but of course, the PRC have a different version of the story.
Right, and so again, what we heard there from Raymond, was it simply admittance that there isn't enough evidence? Then why not say that?
One story would be that the U.S. administration doesn't want to create a problem, and don't forget that the National Security Advisor just visited Beijing, and so if they had made a big deal out of it, his visit might have been canceled. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is that the governor also wants to appear to be a strong person, and that as a result of discovering this thing, that the consul general was kicked out of the country. Two stories that I think that would make sense.
But your view is that they needed to have better, more stringent sort of to have stopped or to have discovered this earlier.
Oh yeah,
is that your position?
There's a whole bunch of things that they could have done.
Right. Raymond, how about the Chinese ambassador in the Philippines? Do you think he should be concerned about his position?
States remain their diplomatic relations even though at time of tension. And those are the customary law for the diplomacy, that they remain basic contact or channel of contact. So I think state will be very reluctant to resorted to persona non grata, those kind of more harsh measures.
Right, because the relations are already fraught, between U.S. and China, as they are with the Philippines and China. In addition to the Linda Sun case, there's also a recent case of the 75-year-old Queens resident Wang Shujun, who is known as a democracy activist, but actually he was convicted of spying for China, and 2 men were also accused of running a secret Chinese police station in Manhattan.
Right.
Gemon, let me come to you.
Yes.
How should we see this sort of rash of cases coming into the public spotlight in the light of the upcoming U.S. presidential election, or should we?
So I believe that it shows that we really need to be concerned about the influence of the Chinese Communist Party against the U.S. government and how they're trying to manipulate the outcome of that election. In the past, both the Chinese government and the Russian government claim that they never did any kind of activity against the elections. But clearly, there's a lot of things going on here that are unusual and highly active. And I think, like I mentioned before, I think there are parts of the U.S. government that want to maintain an open channel to China, but the problem is that when you do that, you put yourself in a position where China can use that as a bait. And so if they feel the U.S. is not playing according to their cards, they can shut down the communication, and then the Americans have to come back and beg to open up the communication. So, and I perceive that the Chinese government doesn't really care about open communications, and they realize that the U.S. government does. And so they therefore want to use that as a means to do behavior modification on the U.S. That's my opinion.
Right. Now, we've touched on some of the differences between US and Chinese spying. In January 2024, CIA Chief William Burns wrote an article in Foreign Affairs magazine saying, while Russia may pose the most immediate challenge, China is the bigger long-term threat. He detailed how the CIA has been reorganizing itself to reflect that priority. The CIA has more than doubled the percentage of its overall budget focused on China over just the last 2 years. He says, we are hiring and training more Mandarin speakers while stepping up efforts across the world to compete with China, from Latin America to Africa to the Indo-Pacific. In 2021, the CIA set up a new mission center focused exclusively on China, the only single country mission center. Raymond, if I can come to you first, and your sort of assessment on that, very, very frank, very honest account by Burns.
That's not the first time. Actually, back to the Trump administration, they argue that for the whole of government approach is to counter the Chinese threat, and alleging that China poses the greatest national security challenge to the United States for this generation, and also the awareness of, for example, then the Attorney General William Barr says about 80% of all U.S. federal economic espionage prosecutions have alleged conduct that will benefit China, and 60% of trade secret theft cases have a Chinese nexus. So they know that China use a combination, for example, foreign state investment and IP threats, forced technological transfer, and private nationals' access to try to get a technology edge over the United States. And so the whole of government approaches, including the Director General of National Intelligence, is included. For example, there's a coordination that could be made. For example, the DNI, National Intelligence Director, could send a small counterintelligence cells to targeted agencies for the United States with the IC professionals, so as to defend the cyber attacks from China. Those coordinated actions need to take.
Right. And so Gemon, I mean, you have touched on a little bit about the difference between US spies and Chinese spies. So, what do US spies do then that is different to what Chinese spies do?
Nothing. Chinese do more, as I mentioned. Out of the last 10 or 15 years, the 1,200 cases were focused on intellectual property theft by China. That's more than any other country combined, ever. So the issue here are the core interests of the CCP. Those core interests are, they want to maintain their power over the PRC, and the second is to maintain territorial integrity, which is code word for Taiwan and the so-called South China Sea. They want to expand their control over Taiwan, and Taiwan is a primary target. Many people don't know that one of the bureaus of the Ministry of State Security is totally focused on Taiwan. That's Bureau number 4. The 18th Bureau is focused on the United States. For the U.S. to say that, oh, we're going to start up a section that's going to totally focus on China, to me is a bit late in coming. I mean, China has been at it for decades, focusing on the United States. And to say, oh, now we're going to create this China Bureau that's going to take care of the problem, it's going to take a long time to fix the problem, in my opinion.
So what I understand from you is that China's spying, it's both for national security, perhaps, yeah, as you said, national integrity, but also for their economic gain as well, whereas the U.S. doesn't so much do economic.
The U.S. intelligence officers don't collect intelligence on Huawei's integrated circuit system and pass it off to Intel. They don't do that. That's not part. That's not allowed.
Right.
But I think that the key here is that the core interests need to be protected, and so the intelligence agencies in China are focused on protecting the Communist Party, ensuring that the borders are controlled, and then the third, below the Taiwan issue, is the economic issue.
Right. Okay. So. Just to reinforce what Guermont said, Raymond, so former CIA senior official Dennis Wilder does say that the primary mission of Chinese intelligence agencies, he said it's the primary mission, is to, quote, disrupt Taiwan everywhere. And also FBI Director Nicholas Ray, just in this year, has said CCP wants to prevent the United States from being able to get in the way of a potential future crisis between China and Taiwan by 2027. For China, does it all really come down to Taiwan?
Part of it, and Taiwan is an integral part of it. There's several ways that China wants to achieve. For example, influence U.S. public opinions. There's influence game to win influence, to try to foster a view that the U.S. soldiers don't need to sacrifice to defend democracy of Taiwan, and also try to cyber attack for the military system and command system for the U.S. Military, and that's a part of the concerns over the AI technologies used for the military purposes. And secondly, about their dual use of the civil equipment to transform it for their military use. Those are not normal function for technology transfer. And also try to influence the political figure like the Linda case. Try to infiltrate into the U.S. decision-making processes. And those are with an aim to weaken the American